Bite counts. Everybody says you need to do them, but do you? That's what we're going to talk about coming right up. Let's go keep some bees. Hey there, beekeepers. Welcome to Beekeeping from Scratch, where we document our journey starting over from scratch and growing our operations back to profitability together with you. Now, if we haven't met yet, my name is Scott McPherson, and this is another episode of the show, Nothing But Bees, where we talk about beekeeping theory, like history, core concepts, myths, and other issues facing our bees. Now, if you enjoy Beekeeping from Scratch videos, please consider liking, subscribing, and ringing that little bell icon so that you get notified the next time we upload a new video. Your subscribership and watching these videos all the way to the end really helps support this channel by getting this material in front of other beekeepers and people interested in keeping bees. Today, we're going to talk about mite counts and what counting mites actually accomplishes, and whether or not it's something you really need to do. And we're going to jump right into that right now. All right, so all the modern literature and just about everybody will tell you that you have to count mites in your beehives. But is that really necessary? Okay, well, first, let's get something straight. For some beekeepers, absolutely yes. Counting mites is an important part of your beekeeping management. Notice, however, that I said some beekeepers. That's what I said. Mite counts are important for some beekeepers. To understand who those beekeepers are, let's talk about what counting mites actually accomplishes. So really, it does one thing and one thing only. It gives you a fair approximation of the number of phoretic mites in your colonies, and that's it. This is usually done by gathering a half a cup of bees, which is about 300 bees, dumping them in alcohol, and shaking them around to dislodge the mites that might be attached to the bees, and then pouring that out and counting the number of mites that you can find in that alcohol wash. So who exactly does this number help? It helps everyone, right? Well, no, not quite. It really only helps those who are interested in and can benefit from this knowledge. So for instance, if you're a treatment-free beekeeper, what exactly is that number going to do for you? I can't imagine any reason why a beekeeper would want to kill 300 bees just for curiosity's sake. So, well, there's one beekeeper who doesn't need to keep mites. Well, what about the beekeepers that should count mites? Well, that's a good question. The beekeepers who should perform mite counts are exactly two types of beekeepers, and only two kinds, with the exception of researchers and scientists. But we aren't talking about bee science here. We're talking about regular everyday beekeepers. So the first kind of beekeeper that should be performing mite counts is the beekeeper who treats his bees for mites. This beekeeper should definitely count mites to know when to treat the mites. If you don't perform mite counts, then you run the risk of either treating too early, too often, or too late. If you treat too early or too often, you just end up damaging your bees and you really gain no real benefit from the treatment. That's not any good. And if you treat too late, well, then maybe the bees will be overwhelmed by the mites and the diseases, and whether you treat them or not, you really have no hope of saving them. Well, you'll never be able to save them. That's not any good either. So for the treating beekeeper, it is imperative that you perform mite counts so that you know exactly when and how often you need to treat your bees. The second kind of beekeeper that might want to know what kind of mite loads is the bee breeder who is specifically looking to breed bees with resistance to or tolerance of high mite loads. The rest of the beekeeping world doesn't really need to know. It is a common question posed to many treatment-free beekeepers if they know the mite loads in their colonies. And perhaps that beekeeper might want to do a mite count so he feels like he's armed with that knowledge. But what are you going to do with it? If you think you're going to win a treatment-free debate because you know your mite loads, think again. Arguments and debates never go as planned. And ultimately, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. What matters for treatment-free beekeepers is whether or not their colonies are going to make it through winter or spring on their own. It's pure and simply a binary result. Did the bees survive through winter and spring, or didn't they? If they did, then they're probably good bees, and you should raise queens from them. If they did not, then obviously you're not going to be breeding from them, are you? But you have the benefit of that vacant equipment to split those strong bees into. Do I care what the mite load of my bees was last year? No. Not really, I don't. What I really care about is, did the bees have one or more of the traits necessary to survive? Whether it's hygienic behavior, high mite tolerance, defensive behavior, ankle biting, smaller worker brood, resistance to secondary disease. I really don't care precisely what it is, so long as the bees make it through winter and spring and are ready for the flow. I don't think it's really understood entirely how bees, are capable of resisting or tolerating mites, whether they defend from them, it's the hygienic behavior. There are a few things that we know about, but there's probably some traits out there that we're not fully aware of, and it could be that some of these traits don't even get triggered until a threshold of mites is reached, and then the bees say, whoa, we got to do something about this. I don't think all of that is really entirely understood. And honestly, I don't really think it matters all that much, because the bees that survived and made it through winter and spring, had one or more of these traits, and probably others that none of us know anything about, that allowed them to make it through winter and spring. That's really all I care about. That's all I need to know. When all of my bees that survive in the spring are split and bred together, these traits are, to some degree, going to be shared, with the rest of the next generation and each subsequent generation that benefits from the winter filter and strengthening of the population. Does knowing mite counts do anything at all to facilitate that? Anything at all? No, it does not. The only thing that mite counts do for treatment-free beekeepers is to record historic numbers, maybe for bee breeding purposes. Again, if the beekeeper is looking to breed, specifically from higher mite load colonies. The only other reason, I could think of for mite counts is to produce fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and cause a beekeeper to maybe want to react to having, higher mite loads in their colonies, causing them to want to treat because they're scared of losing some of their bees. Unless you're going to do something specifically in response to knowing mite levels in your colonies, then you have absolutely no reason to perform mite counts. If you're not going to treat your bees, or specifically breed from survivors of high mite loads, what does knowing the mite count do for you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. If you're interested in filming your own videos, please check out the links in the description below to learn what equipment I use when I'm filming my videos. I get a small commission if you decide to buy, and it doesn't cost you a single penny more. And it really helps support this channel. All right, remember, stay safe. And don't forget, it's about the bees.